All right, we are going to do the Medusa mythical creature. There's my terminal. I've CD'd into the Ruby exercises directory, so we'll ls the contents and we'll cd into mythical creatures. If you're curious about the terminal, this is Zish. The blue stuff shows my present working directory 2 levels up from wherever I currently am, and this is the Git branch that I'm on. All right, Command K to clear the terminal, print working directory, we're there, ls, good enough. We'll open Atom, or open all the current stuff in Atom. So in Atom, if you do Shift-Control-C, it copies the relative path of the current file. So I can do Ruby and then paste Control-V, and that shows test medusa test.rb. And sure enough, it can't load a file. This error code is line 4. Line 4, we're trying to open up libmedusa. So Command-Option-O opens up this little thing that lets me create or open files. So I'm going to delete this, go up into the lib directory, and then we're doing medusa.rb. So here's our Medusa file. I'm going to hit Command-K and then left arrow. It splits the pane down the middle. Now we have Medusa test on the right, Medusa on the left, and we're good to go. So I'm going to run the test again, and now we don't have this constant. So shrinking that down, clearing that. All right, good to go. So we know we've done a bunch of mythical creatures by now. Class Medusa, and we're just going to go ahead. We know it needs a name, so I'm just going to go ahead and write all that out. So we'll do definitialize name, and so I typed end. If you do Command-Shift-Enter, that adds a new line between the current line and the line above it. So this first test should pass. Nailed it. First created has no statues. So we are going to need this thing called statues. It doesn't explicitly say. So this empty, like, how can we know exactly what this means? Like, we could be like, and the test is not going to pass. It's got statues, but it doesn't have a method empty for nil class. So let's open up the Ruby docs. rubylang.org is where we're going to end up. So I'd recommend for all the methods that we'll be using for the rest of the day, head over here. So class array. So we can do Control F, sum to the search bar, and do empty question mark. And here we go. So true or false returns true if self contains no elements. Is that helpful in this particular test, which is statues.empty? The answer is yes, because empty is an array method. So we can do empty question mark here, and we can see that the array class, dbm, env, gdbm. I don't know what all that is, but I know what arrays are. So this is an array. So we can infer from that statues needs to be an array. So rather than making it a method, we're going to do this. We're going to make another attribute at statues equals empty array. And we'll name it statues. So let's try the tests, and it passes. Great, onward. Delete that. And staring at a person, she gains a statue. This is a significant jump in complexity. We just instantiated this Medusa class. Now we have this person class. If you get this to this and you're a little confused, it is quite okay. Generally, in like production code, you don't mix multiple classes into one file, but when you're kicking the tires on something and just experimenting and need to quickly run stuff and see how it goes, you can totally make multiple classes in a single file. So that's what we're going to do. I read this and I'm like, great, I need this person class. We can run the test and we'll see that it doesn't know what this person thing is. This is the same error that it gets if we comment all that code out and run the tests. Uninitialized constant, Medusa test Medusa. So we made this kind of thing pass with this class Medusa, and we're just do this class person, and then we'll run the test. Still get an error. Yep. Initialize expect name. All right, run the tests. Undefined method stare for Medusa. Great. So we got through these first 2 lines of code, and now we have this Medusa.stare thing. So it expects method named stare. We can expect some things about it. So how do we know that like the stare method goes here in Medusa and not person, right? Like we could do def stare here, and like why do this? Why put the method up here? Great question, skeptical listener. The answer is here. So Medusa is this instance of this Medusa class, and calling Medusa.stare, this is a method that needs to be available in this Medusa instance. So that tells us there. So we can do binding.pry. We're going to do that. I often, when I'm like, I need another method, I'll create the bare method name, and then I'll hit it in a pry and start playing from there. So We're going to run the tests and see what we get. We did not hit the pry. Wrong number of arguments given 1 expected 0. So we need the stare method needs to take an argument. Now it takes an argument, and I bet we'll hit the pry. Now we hit it. We can call like victim, right? Because that's a argument. Like if we're here in this line of code and we passed in some object to this victim thing, let's see what it is. So victim, cool. And we've got this person object. I call .class on things all the time, so we can do like victim.class, and we'll get person. Now self, something else I recommend using. Self shows like whatever the current object that this bit of code is being executed within. So we can do like, so now this is this Medusa object named Cassiopeia, empty statues array. So we can do like self.class, and that'll be Medusa. So this is .class and self and argument.class, useful ways to try to kind of keep your head straight about what you're working with. So cool, we're here. What are we actually trying to do in this method? No clue yet. I haven't looked ahead beyond just making sure that like this method would work, and I stuck the pry in there. So we want to assert equal 1 Medusa statues.count, and we want to assert equal Perseus Medusa.statues.first.name. A lot going on here. When we say Medusa.statues, that's this Cassiopeia object. So check out what's the answer to the self question. This Medusa object named Cassiopeia. So if we want to, like if this test wants to be able to call Medusa.statues, I can call self.statues, and that's equivalent. So on line 22 of this test, when we assert equal 1 Medusa.statues.count, I can call self.statues.count, and it's 0. So we want to increment this by 1. So self.class is Medusa. Self.statues is that thing. So .class, that's going to be an array. And if we do .count.class, I don't think that's going to do, oh, fixed num. Okay, great. Oh yeah, because .count is 0, and you call .class on that, that's fixed num. So you can do 0.class and still come up with fixed num. 0 point, or like, let's try 1.class, also fixed num. 1.1.class is going to be float. Great. Medusa is this Medusa object. Statues is an array. So we need to somehow add something to this array. So we're going to do self.statues is in this array, and we're going to shovel in victim. This probably isn't the first time you've seen the shovel operator, but there we go. So we've got self.statues now has this thing. If we want to do it again, we could shovel in victim again, and now we have it twice. Now we do self.statues.count, and it counts the total number of objects that are in there. That's the thread we're going to go. Obviously, we're not going to shovel it in 10 times, but we could do at statues shovel in victim. And I'm going to move the binding.pry underneath that, so that line of code gets executed before I hit it the next time. To move lines of code up and down, or like whole chunks of code up and down, you hold down Control Command and hit the up or down arrow, and it moves it around. And it even preserves the correct indentation. Isn't that amazing? Like, oh, it's beautiful. Okay, so we're going to exit out of this, rerun the tests, and now we're there. So we can call self.statues, which is also the same as calling at statues. And we got that thing in it, that person in it. We can call .count, and it's 1. So this is looking promising. Seems like this should now pass. And then we want to assert equal Perseus Medusa.statues.first.name. That is a lot of chaining methods onto each other. So let's try it. So we know Medusa can be used as self. So we're going to do self. Self.statues is that. And let's call .class on it. So that's an array. So now we're going to call .first, because that's this next line of code, or next method that's being chained on. Cool. So that this, what is the difference between self.statues.first and self.statues? You might say one is in the array and one is not. A lot of time, you will often in your Turing experience and your programming experience, the difference between a single object and a single object wrapped in an array is a world of difference. So just get in the habit, if you see brackets on something, it's in an array. So self.statues.class is an array. Self.statues.first is the item in the array, .class, and now we've got a person. So when we're calling Medusa.statues.first.name, we're calling like this method, this name method, is this function, or I'm sorry, this function definition, what are they called? Methods. Methods, this is a method in Ruby that we've written that allows us to access the name method on this person class. That was a lot of information, but hopefully you're with me. We're going to take that out, and we're going to exit this pry, rerun the tests, and I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to pass. Nailed it. Unskip this. So when staring at a person, that person turns to stone. We've got this Medusa victim thing, and then we're going to refute victim.stoned. Refute is a mini test method, so we can do, we're just going to Google mini test assertions refute. API doc. So fails if test is a true value. That doesn't give any examples, so that's not helpful. So open up this docs, Control F, refute. Here we go. Fails if test is true. Also not helpful. Okay. Refute passes if the thing is nil. And we can check this out. Binding, or run that test, and we can say false. Like so false, and we can call .class on that, by the way. False.class is false class. Nil.class is nil class. True.class is true class. So these are all smatters. Not a lot. So we could say like refute false, and it comes else false. Refute true. Failed. So I don't know. Whatever. That wasn't a great digression. Carrying onward. So we want victim.stoned. So we've got this victim thing. So we want victim.stoned question mark to be false. Right now we're getting no method error. So victim is again this person class. So we just know we can nestle it in right here. End. And what do we want in here? So we want to refute that victim is stoned. So that means that we want this to come back as false or nil. But then over here, we want to be able to toggle it. So there's a bunch of different ways you can maybe solve this. Feels to me the simplest. I'm just going to create a new attribute for it. And then stoned is going to check that. So we're going to say stoned is just going to return this attribute. So at stoned equals stoned. And we're going to make an add a reader. Stoned. That should make sense. So stoned A is the Canadian pronunciation. Stoned A just checks for this value of stoned. Let's rerun the tests, and we're going to see something cool. So we've got this victim thing, right? Victim name, and then now we have this at stoned attribute equals nil. So we can do like victim.stoned, and you get nil, and you can do victim.stoned A, and you also get nil. So stoned equals stoned. Stoned isn't defined. What am I doing here? This is false. I'm surprised that it even let me do that. I guess because stoned isn't defined. Like stoned is whatever. So we're going to exit this, rerun the tests. We've got victim here. We can call, so now we got stoned as false, which looks good. So we can call victim.stoned without any question mark. We get false. And then victim.stoned question mark also equals false. We know that refute victim.stoned is going to pass because this is by default set to false. But then when Medusa.stare, like when the stare thing happens, we want this victim.stoned to come back as true. So what we're going to do is binding.pry and rerun our test. All right, we run self. We've got Cassiopeia, and I don't actually know which of these tests that I just ran hit this pry. And I feel like it matters, right? I only want to work on this test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit, and I hit it again. So I'm going to type exit again. Cool. I'm going to copy and paste this whole name. And I'm going to bring up that last line. I'm going to say -- name equals, and then there's a regular expression, so slash. I'm going to paste that whole name in there. So now Minitest is going to look for a test name that matches what I just gave it. Then it's going to run just that test. So now I know that when I hit this pry, which I just hit, it is inside of this block of code. It's not in any other block of code. So got victim. So we can say like, is victim.stoned question mark? And it says false because we just called this method on this victim. So let's try like victim.stoned equal, so victim.stoned is false, so we want it equal true. So we would just try setting it to true, right? Like if we want it to be something that it's not, we can just try setting it straight to that. Said undefined method stoned equals for this class. Which means stoned, stoned A, whatever. So here we are going to add an adder access writer. So an adder reader lets you read things. Adder writers let you write to attributes from outside that class. We'll talk more about, this isn't an ideal solution, but it's a good enough solution for now. So we're going to exit, run that again. Got the same error. Maybe adder accessor. I know those of you watching along at home are probably pointing out my spelling errors all day long. Adder accessor, let's try that. Got it. So we've got victim, and we can try victim.stoned is false, and let's try victim.stoned equals true. Nailed it. So if we could then call victim, stoned is true. So victim.stoned question mark comes back as true. So we're going to run with that. Victim.stoned equals true. Great. Command or Shift Control K deletes the line, and exit, rerun the tests, and it passes. You'll notice just this single test passed by itself. To run all the tests, we have to delete this like dash dash name thing. All right, getting close. Test can only have 3 victims. So we've got this new Medusa and victim 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to stare one at a time at each of these victims and assert equal 3 Medusa.statues.length. So let's just run this and see what happens. All right, we got 4 and we expected 3, and that failed on line 45. So we need a way to cause us to not go above 3 victims. We are going to stick pry in here, run this test, grab this name, dash dash name equals / paste in the name, closing slash there, by the way, this has to be wrapped in slashes. Now we've got this thing. Now, this test calls stare once, twice, thrice. So if we do statues, we'll see it's got this one. So then we'll do exit, and we're going to hit it again. And if we call statues again, we see that we've got 2. So I'm going to exit statues. Now I've got 3 statues. So when I hit exit, I'm expecting the 4th stare call to happen. And there's going to be 4 statues in here. So this is not good. We want to not do that. A couple different things. So let's say we could do this. We could say if statues.length is less than 3, we'll carry those things onwards. And then if not, we just won't do anything. So let's try that. And it passes. Cool. Play with this a little bit. If it doesn't make sense, I've got a thing at the end that'll help you out. So we just wrap this in an if statement where we're not going to enter this line of code unless statues.length is less than 3. Or we do if statues.length is, if we did less than or equals to. If we did less than or equals to, we could get to 3. This might still work. I don't actually, didn't work. So we'd have to do less than or equal to 2. Off by 1 errors are common and tricky, so be careful with them. So statues.length less than or equal to 2. Great, so this makes this test pass. Test that if a 4th victim is stoned, first is unstoned. And let's make sure all of our tests pass. So we're going to take that out and run it all, and we're good to go. Dash n, oh yeah, so dash dash name equals, can also be shortened to single dash n equals, and then you do / and grab the name. Because apparently programmers can't be bothered to write out the word name instead of dash n, I don't know. That's how things work. So this is skipped. So we're going to unskip this. Rerun that line of code, up arrow, enter, and fails. Doesn't say why. So test of 4th victim is stoned. The 1st is unstoned. Victim 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the same setup as this test. Medusa.stare, victims 1, 2, 3, 4. So we assert. Okay, so now the 1st victim is no longer stoned, and then the 3 other victims are stoned. We've got this refute victim 1. So assert equal 3 Medusa statues.length. So what this code is doing is it's the 4th, basically this Medusa can only stone the first 3 victims that it stones, and 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever, nothing happens. So what we want to do is when you try to add something in the back, it pops off the 1st statue in the front, and that statue needs to be unstoned. We're going to do just a nasty funky method that does too much in one thing, and then we're going to clean it up. You should write this along with me. If statues.length is less than or equal to 2, we add the statues, and victim.stoned equals true. Let's throw an else in here. Else, so this is now if we have additional statues, so this would be like the 4th, we're going to say at statues.pop. Let's stick a pry in here and run the code. So we should hit that else, so we can... Okay, so we are in this else block, and we know that we have a couple statues in here, because this line of code wouldn't have been evaluated unless the statues.length didn't meet this less than or equals to 2 criteria. So we can just call statues, and we've got 3. So how do we get rid of one? Common array method to remove an item in it is .pop. Statues is Tim. That was the last one. So statues is now going to be too long, but still going to have Perseus and Alex. So we wanted the first one. We wanted to get rid of this one. The opposite of popping is unshift. Why is... Dang it. This is awkward. I've been doing this for 3 years, y'all. I don't remember how to get the first object off. It is... Let's try shift. Hey! Statues. There we go. All right, so I'm going to exit this and try that whole thing over again so we can have the right statues. So we've got statues here, and we're going to try statues.shift, which is the opposite of pop. So that popped off Persis, so now we expect statues just have Alex and Tim. Nailed it. And then, so if we did like statues and then shoveled in victim, now Josh is in there. Hey! So we're going to do, so this else, we're going to do statues.shift, and then at statues, and we're going to shovel in victim. So you'll notice that these 2 lines of code is close. We'll clean those up later. But statues.shift is going to get rid of a statue. And then we're going to have this victim thing. So let's put a binding.pry in here, exit here, up arrow to bring that back. And undefined method for nil class. I can't spell statues. Actually, I can spell. Spelling is hard as a developer. You're going to spell the same word over and over and over and over and over again. So you're going to be like statues, 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 statues. Statuesses? Like, this is weird. So let's try statues. It now has 2, which is great. And then victim is me. So then we can hit N, which stands for next, executes next line of code. Next. Nope, never mind. It's a different version of pry. We're just going to exit out. So that was nil. So let's take that pry out, rerun our tests, see what happens. Undefined method, error for nil class. Why? Oh. Spelling, y'all. Oh, there's a great Atom package that I'll reference that anytime you double click a word, it highlights all instances of that word in the pane, which is gold if you have a spelling error. So if I'm doing something like this, I can be like, statues, what? Oh, that's not highlighted. Or there's no other instances of status. Super handy. So up arrow, whoa, don't know what I did there. Up arrow, failure. So this failed at line 60. What is line 60 doing? Refute victim.1.stoned. So here we go. I'm going to now stick the binding here in the test. Up arrow. So we want victim1. Stoned is true and we want it to be false. How do we make it false? We can do victim1.stoned equals false. This isn't going to work because stoned question mark doesn't set anything, but if we remove the question mark, that's going to work. So how could we do victim1.stoned equals false in this method that we've got over here? Great question. So statues.shift, what does this do? This like pops off. Statues.shift assigns as of, you can assign, if you do like old victim equals statues.shift, now whatever pops off of the statues array, or I'm sorry, shifts off of the statues array gets assigned to old victim. So that means we can do old victim.stoned equals false. False. So this will now take our old victim, which is a person. This is going to set their stoned attribute to false. So if this line of code gets executed, we're going to shift the first statue off of it, assign that to the old victim variable. Then this old victim, if we call .class on it, here we can put a binding dot here, run the code, and old victim is now this person class. So we can call .class, and there it is. So that means we can do old victim.stoned equals false. Cool. All right, remove that pry, run the test, pass, fails, awkward, 63, assert victim.for.stoned. Ah, yes. So we've got this, we've kind of now resolved the old victim thing, but we still need to make the actual current victim stoned. So we can do victim because remember that's this thing up here. So we can do victim.stoned equals true. All right. This is bad code though. I mean, it's not. I decided to make this bigger because what I'm telling you is really important. We're going to refactor this code in a moment. I need you to do two things. One, pause the video and go take a walk. We've covered a lot of ground in an unbelievably long amount of time. And if you're watching this video, I am shocked that you have the patience to deal with this. So pause the video, go take a walk. When you come back, we're going to refactor this code into something that's a lot better, and that's going to be great. Let's say we're 30 minutes into this video, maybe you spent an hour, maybe more on this mythical creature. The refactoring is to take a fraction of the time that it took to build the first video, but it's going to help solidify so many better practices that you can carry forward into your future as a software developer. So right now you have built this thing, this Medusa class, and that's not super portable as a developer. No one's going to be like, hey there, new software developer, please join our team and build us a bunch of mythical creatures. They need you to solve business problems, and the way you solve business problems is by writing code, and you want to write code that is conformant to standards and expectations, so when other people or future versions of you read your code, they understand exactly what it's doing. In the job hunt, or not, I'm sorry, in the job field, period, as a developer, you're going to spend way more time reading code than you're going to spend writing code. So optimizing for readability is important. Once you're back from your walk, which you are going to take, please take a walk. Leave a comment or DM me in Slack and be like, hey Josh, I took a walk when you asked me to. Please take a walk. Don't just sail through this. If you think that it's worth finishing this video, go take the walk, then come back and finish the video.